Daf Yomi, Tractate Menachos, Daf Chav Daled, page 24, starting at the bottom of 23b. Kisa lekrav kahana shkechinu levnei Rabbi Chia yasvi kamri saran shechilku. The Gemara relates, when Rav Kahana ascended from Babylonia to Eretz Israel, he found the sons of Rabbi Chia who were sitting and saying the following: in the case of a tenth of an ephah of a meal offering that one divided, now we're on the top of Menachot 24a. And placed it inside a receptacle such that the flour of the measure was in two places, not in contact with each other, and one who was ritually impure, who immersed that day and is waiting for nightfall for the purification process to be completed, touched one of the portions of the meal offering. What is the halacha? Does he disqualify only the part of the meal offering that he touched, or the other part as well? When we learned in the Mishnah, Chagiga 20b, that a vessel joins all the food that is in it with regard to sacrificial food, meaning that if some of the contents become impure, all the contents become impure as well. Does this matter apply only where the contents are touching each other, but where the contents are not touching each other, the ritual impurity is not imparted to the other contents, or perhaps there's no difference? Amar lahu ihu mi tenan kli mechaber kli metzaref tenan kol dehu hoishidecha devnein mahu. Rav Kahana said to the sons of Rav Chia, did we learn in the Mishnah that a vessel connects the contents within it? We learned that a vessel joins the contents within it, indicating that it does so in any case, whether or not the contents are in contact with one another. The sons of Rabbi Chia then asked Rav Kahana, if one inserted another 1/2 of an ephah between them, and one who was ritually impure, who immersed that day, touched it, what is the halacha? Are the first 2/2 rendered impure? Amar lehu tzorich lichli kli mitzalfo. Ein tzorich lichli ein kli mitzalfo. Rav Kahana said to them, only when an item requires a vessel in order for it to be sanctified, for example, in the case of the 2/2 of an ephah of a meal offering, does the vessel join it together. In the case of an item that does not require a vessel, such as this 1/2 that was placed between them, the vessel does not join it. Hoishit tvul yomet etzba'u b'nein ma'u. Amar lehu ein lecha davar shemitame me'aviro ela kli cheres bilvad. The sons of Rabbi Chia then asked, if one who immersed that day inserted his finger between the 2/2 of the ephah that were placed in the receptacle without touching either one, what is the halacha? Are the 2/2 rendered impure? Rav Kahana said to them in response, the only item you have that transmits impurity through its airspace is an earthenware vessel alone. Hadar ihu ba'aminaihu mahu likmotz mize al ze tzeruf deraisa oy derabanan. Rav Kahana himself then asked the sons of Rabbi Chia, if 2/2 of an ephah of a meal offering are placed in one vessel, but are not in contact with each other, what is the halacha? Can one remove a handful from this 1/2 of an ephah on behalf of that 1/2 of an ephah? Is the joining of the contents of the vessel effective by Torah law or by rabbinic law? If it is effective by Torah law, then the removal of the handful is valid. If it is effective by rabbinic law, then the removal of the handful was not performed correctly. since it was not taken from the entire tenth of an ephah of the meal offering. Amru lo, zo lo shemanu kiyotzi bo shemanu. Ditnan. Shte menachos shelo nikmetzu v'nis'arvu ze zo bezo. Im yachol likmoitz mizo mivnei atzma o mizo mivnei atzma k'sheirois v'im la pesulois. They said to Rav Kahana, we did not hear the halacha with regard to this case explicitly, but we heard the halacha with regard to a case similar to this, as we learned in the Mishnah. In the case of two meal offerings, from which a handful was not removed, and from which were intermingled with each other, if the priest can remove a handful from this meal offering by itself, and from that meal offering by itself, they are fit meal offerings, but if not, they are unfit, as the handful of each meal offering must be taken from its original source. They explain, in any event, the Mishnah teaches that in a case when he can remove a handful from each meal offering, the meal offerings are fit. Why is this considered a valid removal of the handful? But this part of the meal offering that is intermingled with the other meal offering does not touch the part of the meal offering from which the handful is removed. Evidently, the vessel joins the different parts of the meal offering together, and one can remove the handful from any parts of its contents, even if they are not touching. Rava said, this cannot be inferred from the Mishnah, as perhaps the ruling of the Mishnah is stated with regard to a case where the clumps of the meal offering are divided like the teeth of a comb, so that although the handful is removed from a clump of the meal offering that is separate from the clump that is intermingled with the other offering, all parts of the meal offering are still in contact with one another. It may still be that, in the case presented by Rav Kahana, where the parts are truly separated from one another, it is possible that one cannot remove the handful from one part on behalf of the other. My Havela. Amarave Toshima Titania. Beher mimenu min המחובר שלא יביא סורוין ושני כלים היקמויץ הובך לי אחד ומיד ושני כלים קומיץ. The Gemara asks, since this question was not resolved, what halachic conclusion was reached about the matter? Rava said, come and hear a proof, as is taught in a Braita. The verse states, and he shall take up from his handful, Leviticus 6:8, meaning that he shall take the handful from the meal offering that is connected. This teaches that one shall not bring a tenth of an ephah divided in two vessels and remove the handful from one on behalf of the other. It can therefore be inferred that in the case of one vessel that is similar to two vessels, as the entirety of the meal offering is brought in one vessel, although the different parts are not touching, one may remove the handful from one part on behalf of the other part. Amalei Abaye Dilma Shnei Kelim Hechidomi Kegoin Kepiza Bekabo Diav al Gav Derivi Meilai Kevan de Mipaskan Mechitzata Dik Pisa Mitata. Abaye said to Rava, perhaps one could say, what are the circumstances when the Braita states that one may not bring a tenth of an ephah in two vessels? The circumstances are, for example, if one hollowed out the area of a smaller kefitza, measure within the area of a larger kav measure, so that within the one receptacle there were two cavities divided by a partition that did not reach the top of the receptacle, in this case, even though the two are intermingled on top, above the partition, since the partition of the kefitza measure divides them below, they are still separated and not joined together. Hakli echad dumya d'shnei kelim hechidami kigon arevas tarnegoelim yafal gav demi paskan mechitzata hanegia aval hacha de lo negia klal tibayelach. Abaya continues, what are the circumstances of one vessel that is similar to two vessels, with regard to which you inferred that one may remove the handful from one part on behalf of the other part? The circumstances are, for example, a hen trough that is filled with water or fodder, and even though a partition divides the top of the trough, the contents are touching below. But here, in the case of 2/2 of an ephah that are placed in a receptacle that are not touching each other at all, you should raise the dilemma as to whether the handful may be removed from one part on behalf of the other. Rabbi Yirmiyah raises a dilemma in a scenario where a vessel joins the 2/2 of an ephah that are inside the vessel but not touching, and there is a connection by means of water between one of the 0.5 of the ephah inside the vessel and another 0.5 of an ephah that is outside the vessel, and one who immersed that day touched the other 0.5 of an ephah that is inside the vessel. What's the halacha? Does he also disqualify the 0.5 of an ephah that is outside the vessel? When we learned in the Mishnah, Chagiga 20b, that a vessel joins all the food that is in it with regard to sacrificial food, meaning that if some contents become impure, all the contents become impure as well. Does this matter apply only to that which is inside the vessel, but not to that which is outside of it, despite the fact that the outer item is connected to an item inside the vessel? Or perhaps, since the 0.5 of an ephah found outside the vessel is connected to an impure item, it is connected and becomes impure? If we Rabbi Yirmiyah continues, and if you say that since the 0.5 of an ephah found outside the vessel is connected to an impure item, it is connected and becomes impure, one can raise another dilemma. In a case where there is a connection by means of water between a 0.5 of an ephah outside the vessel and another 0.5 of an ephah that is inside the vessel, and the vessel joins two 0.5 of an ephah that are inside the vessel, and one who immersed that day touched the 0.5 of an ephah that is outside the vessel. What is the halacha? Kitzanan kli mitzaref hani milinagal b'barai alva mibarai la odim baloishna teiku. This would be the 234th teiku in the Babylon Talmud. Lai 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 lai. When we learn in a Mishnah that a vessel joins all the food that is in it with regard to sacrificial food, meaning that if some of the contents become impure and all the contents become impure as well, does this matter apply only in a case where one who immersed that day touched that which is inside the vessel, thereby transmitting impurity to all the contents of the vessel, and due to the connection by means of water, the impurity is then transmitted to that which is outside the vessel? But it does not apply in a case where the one who immersed that day touched that which is outside of the vessel, and only the 0.5 of an ephah that is connected to the outer item becomes impure, or perhaps this case is no different, and the vessel joins all of its contents with regard to ritual impurity. The Gemara comments, the dilemma shall stand unresolved. Boi rove, Isav shechilku, v'nitma echad mehen, v'nicha v'visa v'chazat v'yoy v'nogah v'yisotamahu, mi'aminon savarov tu'olo. It has been demonstrated that the vessel joins the contents that are found in it, even if they are not touching one another, with regard to ritual impurity, such that if some of the contents become impure, all the contents are rendered impure. Rav raises a dilemma. With regard to a tenth of an ephah of a meal offering, that one divided and then placed the two halves in different vessels, and one of them became impure, and afterward he placed it in the receptacle along with the second half of an ephah, second half tenth of an ephah, and then one who immersed that day touched that one that was already rendered impure. What is the halacha? Do we say that the item is already saturated with impurity and cannot be rendered impure a second time, and therefore the second half tenth of the ephah is not rendered impure, even though it is joined in the same receptacle or not? Now turn to 24b. Midras v'yasel vilon toya ben midras al tamim midras. Abai said to him, and do we say that an item that is already saturated with impurity cannot be rendered impure a second time? But didn't we learn in the Mishnah, Kalim 27:9, with regard to a sheet that is impure due to ritual impurity, imparted, now 24b, imparted by treading? For example, if a man who experiences a gonorrhea-like discharge, the Zav lay down on it and transferred it to this severe impurity, and afterwards one made a curtain of it, it is pure with regard to ritual impurity imparted by treading, as it is no longer fit for sitting or lying down, but it is impure due to having been in contact with an item that became ritual impure with impurity imparted by treading, as it is viewed as having been in contact with itself, and therefore it can impart impurity to food and drink.